painting to photography, from beadwork to woodworking, KQAL-FM on the campus of Winona State University presents Art Beat. Art Beat highlights the work and accomplishments of local artists from in and around Winona. Support for Art Beat is made possible by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.
Today on Art Beat, we speak with local poet Pete Engen. Pete is a published poet, has written liner notes for local bands, and also emceed the 2019 Boats and Bluegrass Festival here in Winona. We spoke to Pete as he is getting ready to publish his first full book of poetry titled Flower House and Feral Sun. I'm Bill Stoneberg with poet Pete Engen on today's Art Beat. I'm here with Peter Engen today. He's a local poet and just read a draft of a book he's working on. Some really good stuff. Pete, how you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Good.
How about you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing good. Thanks for being on the show. We really appreciate it. As I mentioned, you're a poet, but you've also done things, some spoken word stuff. I know at least you emceed the Boats and Bluegrass Festival last fall in 2019.
Yeah.
That was really cool to see. How did you, let's hit the ground running. How did you get started writing poetry? Like, what initially sparked that interest and that drive?
Wow, that's a great question. How much time do you have?
Like I said, we're going to hit the ground running, right?
Okay. I think it was, I knew I wanted to write, and I was just talking about this as kind of a family reunion here last weekend, where my grandmother, who has since passed, was a secretary for the family business, and she had typewriters. So, she did her work on old manual typewriters, of which I'm an aficionado. So I started writing or just fascinated by typing the words, being able to think of something and then, having it flipped up on a clean page was kind of my first. There was the mechanics of it as well. So I really feel like in the beginning, I don't know if people start with poetry. Maybe you do in school or something like that. I tried to write little stories, but they got to be too much for my attention span. Mm-hmm. So I kept winnowing things down into a poem. And I think probably after high school, I really started to focus in. So it was very early on. I mean, I was writing in high school, but first year in college, I pretty much slid right into poetry and into the literary, the literary journals in my college, and then never really looked back. And I continue to try to write things that are a little longer, but it just, I get stuck on that real concentrated thing that is poetry. I like that.
Right.
I keep coming back to it.
Nice. So. It's always interesting to hear where people start out, where that spark comes from, and it sounds like with you, it sounds like it was kind of a natural progression, like a natural fit, that, like especially, it's interesting when people are into the mechanics of something early on as well, usually when I talk to people that have that, they're way into it, and like, I don't know. There's a quality I think that gives, when you're into every aspect of it.
I think with musicians, they sit down and it's typing is a lot like playing the piano. Mm-hmm. You hit the key, you make a sound. You hit the key, you make a word, make a letter. A painter finds the same thing, and I just the mechanics of it stuck to me, and then I had things I had to work out. I do have things I need to work out. Mm-hmm. That's how I think an artist at the very root of things wants to be understood.
Right.
And that's, writing is my way of trying to be understood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's what works.
Right, it's expression.
Sometimes I wish I was a musician.
Well, I think there's
or a painter, but I've dabbled.
Right. I think that's quite common too, and it's interesting that you say that because I was, when I was reading some stuff here that you sent me, it reminded me of reviewing an album, when I get an album in from a musician or something,
Yeah. Well, cool.
It's yeah. And I totally understand what you're saying there with the painting and stuff like that. I dabble in music a little bit, and I've always been jealous of painters. I've always thought that was really cool how you can take a blank canvas and create an image, So
Yeah.
I think a lot of artists are interested in other art forms,
Well, and I like how you said you were a little jealous or envious. I think there's that circle, I have songwriters envious of poets, and poets envious of painters, and painters
Right.
Big circle of insecurity that we have as artists.
Totally.
So
totally. Do you have you mentioned you started maybe studying poetry in college and stuff like that. Do you have favorite poets or anything, or anyone that really caught your interest early on or something?
It's pretty. It seems like it's kind of cliche. It probably is in a way, but I never gravitated towards what I would call, academic poets or things like that, things you would study in school. So, and I'm a big fan of what Bukowski has done, Charles Bukowski, and he's been a huge influence, and I always return to him. But there's a vein of poets that are real to me, I guess, and so Robert Bly would be another one. Al Purdy, I've been reading him lately. Sometimes contemporary confessional poets or something. I suppose there's terms for it all, but then there's some local people. There's some local, regional sort of. We have our own dialect here, so I guess I stray away from that sort of pomp and circumstance, that fluffy stuff.
Right.
It's never resonated with me, so that's where I'm at with that.
Right. Well, I think I know what you're saying there. I always kind of think it's almost like the stuff on the street, for lack of a better term, is kind of where the cutting edge is. It seems like, And I like that you said we have our own dialect when you mentioned local people, I think the same goes for music. There's a thing that happens in an area where, the art is coming from that area, from a person who has the same experiences as other people that live in that area. I think it's really special and unique that way,
Yeah. Well, and I think if we don't have, I think things happen to artists when they get, through recognition, and things can get a little convoluted, and if you keep stripping it back to people who in some ways are maybe self-deprecating, I suppose, but like a Charles Bukowski or a John Fonte or Henry Miller or something, it's just kind of this sobering. They're not afraid to kind of strip it down and tell it like it is,
and probably break rules too as well.
Or create their own,
right? Right.
Or not hold to whatever that whatever the norm is at the time that they're doing things. Even like Fitzgerald and these sort of. I like pulpy stuff. I like things that are, not afraid of a little dirt under the fingernails and gritty, and things like that.
Yeah, and I noticed also in the little bio on the draft you sent me, it says you grew up in Spring Grove, Minnesota, and then and a lot around Minnesota and Wisconsin. Do you think that do you think environment? How much role do you think that plays in someone's development as an artist? Has that affected your work quite a bit? The area you live in?
I think so. I think, as you ask that, I think everybody's environment is obviously going to affect them, or hopefully it does. But as you ask that, I think one of the things that affected me most was that it was a small town, and so there's that ethos to the whole mix, or my upbringing. Not necessarily, of course, secondary, and maybe not even secondary, but the geographical location. So, being in the Driftless, or what we call the Driftless here, but having that sort of rural, small town ruralness to it. There is the bucolic part of it, I suppose, and I guess I don't really write to the bucolic part, but I might, for better or worse, write to the trauma that might result in growing up in a small town and the mentalities that would go on there, the sort of, maybe the uglier side of things.
Okay.
And not to say that it's not beautiful and bucolic, but, and some of that does shine through. But, so yeah, I think it affects it a lot. The people, the faces, that sort of culture or lack thereof, depending on what sort of a mood I'm in. But yeah, I mean, there was a Spring Grove specifically, beautiful town. There's a lot of very special things that happen there. Like I say, it's it's the oldest Norwegian settlement west of the Mississippi, and they work hard at trying to provide a kind of an artsy scene for a tiny little town like that, which, most people, tiny towns like that, they're all about their football team and this and that. Not that Spring Grove isn't, but there's some progressive people there, which is nice.
Well, and I think that, all aspects of growing up in a small town, I think that is probably what makes your work relatable to those of us who've also grown up in the small rural areas, we recognize those things in it, and it feels good to have that confirmation, from the art.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
I think that's pretty cool.
That's good that resonates.
Yeah.
Getting back to, I think there's a very specific, I would say it a lot as I do, some writing for musicians and their albums and things like that, their liner notes, and there's a very specific energy or vibe to our specific geographic location. I think it has to do with the changing of the seasons. I mean, what we have, how we survive winters together, and the angle of the sun. It creates our own. We have our own kind of bluegrass. We have our own rock. We have our own, and it's a tune that I think it's in our hard drive.
Right.
It's there, and it's there's a big part of it has to do with just geographically and having to survive the weather as we sit here and 96% humidity outside.
Right. Yeah, usually when we talk about weather in Minnesota, and everyone's usually talking about winter and snow, but man, it gets humid here in the summer. Holy.
I take the snow over this any day.
Yeah, for sure.
It's sauna out there.
Speaking of like the environment and stuff like that, I noticed that a lot of your work talks a lot about nature and animals, and also cats. There's a lot. I've noticed a few cat ones, that caught my eye too. Do you think that just happens because of the environment and the stimuli that you're exposed to, or is there a conscious decision behind that as well?
I think it's it's both. But the stimuli, that's what works for me. Is usually a line or two will come either just before bed or just when I get up, or something will be ruminating, and I'll get a line or two, and it'll just seem that's right. That's there it is. There's the nugget which I have to build on, and I try a lot to give characteristics, emotional characteristics, I guess you would say, to sort of things that you wouldn't normally give an emotional characteristic or quality to, whether it be an element of nature, an animal, trying to draw correlations between maybe our thoughts, my thoughts, and something from the natural world. If my thoughts are the same as a cloud's or something like that, to try to give that characteristic to them. And I think that definitely is something that is my environment, because I see as I move from perhaps living in a communal farm situation, now I'm living right in La Crosse in a nice little neighborhood in an old house, and the energy, the vibe changes. The things that I see out my window, there's a sidewalk now instead of a little stream.
Right.
So the stimulus is going to change, and I think that makes it into the daily routine of trying to put something out there. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And my cat, of course, I love my cat. So
Cool.
we've I don't know what it is. What is it with writers and cats?
I don't know. What's your cat's name?
Severus.
Severus. Nice.
Oh, Sevy. He's a huge black cat.
Oh, cool. How long have you had him?
Yeah, he's only about a year and a half old.
Oh.
He was a Humane Society pickup, a rescue cat.
Cool.
He was a stray. He was a street cat.
Oh, wow.
Just perfect for me.
So he's got a cool attitude.
He's pretty mellow, actually.
Oh, yeah?
I don't know a whole lot of cats, but he's chill.
Nice.
He gets treated pretty well.
Right.
Soft cat food this morning, so
Cool.
he's styling right now.
Well, I think that's interesting, that you mentioned, living out in the country and then living in the city. It affects your, it affects your outlook. It affects everything, you're experiencing. There was a particular poem here that really caught my eye because of one line. And here's the whole line is, like water buffalo over the Stampede Crag, flat-bottomed John boats skim the surface, dragging buck-tailed jigs that start the slow, deliberate walleye crawl. And that the buck-tailed jigs that start the slow, deliberate walleye crawl just really caught my eye, or my ear, really, and the flat-bottomed John boats skimming the surface, And this is from, We Are All Beginning to Breathe, which is in the book. And that one just really, the flat-bottom John boats, all of a sudden in my mind I was there. I could see, the boats in the morning, and do you ever sit, talking about, how environment affects your work, do you ever go out and sit like by the lake or out in the woods and kind of work that way, just kind of play with that, or does it kind of happen in your head? Or
I think for me it's I will have the experience, or I will, I'm a habit of mine is taking the drive. I call it the loop, whether I go up from La Crosse to Winona and then around on one side of the river, then down the other, or go down to Lansing and, up one side, down the other.
Right.
Or go fishing, so I have a little 14-foot semi-V that I go out there and, sit, but I don't do any writing that would get done with my head, and then I have to come back to my station. I have to have my little area. I have to, no matter where I live, I have to have a little place carved out where, it could be just a stool at the counter, but I have to have a little, a station, I guess.
Yeah, a workspace.
Typewriter's got to sit there.
Right. I think it's important. I think that's important. Do you? Oh, and then another thing, because that poem was the last one in the book. The first one. This is something I'm really curious about. Would you be interested in reading anything for us? Like maybe the first poem, "Warm Wind."
I would have to.
You have to pull it up.
I'd have to pull that out of a book or something.
Okay.
I'm just on my phone right now. I'm kind of a technophobe, so I don't have a lot of screens other than
right.
my typewriter.
Well,
Warm Wind, I probably have that committed to memory.
Okay.
But
you want to give it a shot?
Sure. Every time my heart catches a warm wind is with the hope that the hawk will spare the field mouse, because inside of me lives both.
Ooh, I love it. Now, the interesting thing for me, and what I'm curious about, is, like we've made the comparison already about music and poetry, painting, all different art forms. I'm always curious of how artists build an album, and why they choose to put which song in what order.
The sequencing?
Yeah, the sequencing. What is that like for you? How do you decide what to put where? I'm always curious, as that first track is what I'm always curious about. What are they going to present first? And that one, I really like that one, because that kind of put me there too. Especially growing up
that
in
one's
a rural
real
area.
Strong.
Yeah,
it's a real strong, nice, short, concentrated little bit of yumminess, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what my experience in the past has been, and what I've sort of grown into. I can say I'm comfortably old enough now to know that I need to seek others' advice and their perspective. So on this project, Flower House and Feral Sun, this chapbook is going to be published by an appendant body of the Driftless Books and Music, and so it's a nice facet of the gem that is that bastion of Driftless progressive stronghold, I guess. And then I'm also working with my good friend Parker Forsell, who a lot of people in the area know, and he's a good detail-oriented person who is also very literary and is helping me sequence and edit both selections and content within this book. He's suggested at this one, and it's always good to have, I think, some different views. I'm not so control-oriented where I've got to, micromanage everything, but trying to put things in a season, and so it kind of flows with, our seasons here, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So there are some spring poems, some summer poems, some, even if it's not in the poem, it's kind of where they're at emotionally, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's how this one's going to flow, if we do it right.
Right.
So that's how this one's coming together. And we're already working on the next one, which I have more material that is more prose poems. They're longer, and it just doesn't, I don't know whether you do how we're going to quite go about that, but it's an interesting process laying out a book. I'll put it that way, because you're dealing with pages and what poem fall. It's not like a story, where just the sentence can run on. You want the poem to hold on to its integrity, the shape of it, just this integral shape of the actual words on the page. So there's quite a bit of farting around when you get right down to it, which is not my favorite thing to do, to be honest. I'd rather create content.
Yep. That's a common thing.
I mean, this is musicians in the studio. It's the same thing. We all, piss and moan about the same thing.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. Will this be the first full book you'll have published then, or?
Yeah, I've attempted many different times, not many, half a dozen times. I've put out collections of poems, just basically for myself, and then for the handful or a couple of handfuls of friends that were really have just always readers of mine, and I've put together collections every few years of something. And then my children were real young. I took a long hiatus from the whole thing for a while there, and then I've just in the last 4 or 5 years have been concentrating back to it again.
Cool.
But as far as the publisher coming in and putting something together formally, this will be my first chapbook. I've been published in quite a few journals and magazines, and I don't know, things like that, competitions, I guess you would say, which that's very nice, and it's good to have, a few books on the shelf that you're in. But yeah, this is the first one that's all me.
Cool. What was the first thing you ever had published, and how'd that feel?
Yeah, that's like the first time on stage when somebody claps, I think.
Right.
You get a fix, and then it's like, oh God, I got to keep doing this.
Yep.
It feels good. It feels right.
For sure.
No, I think I was in college when getting real recognition as far as getting published. For me, it's tough because I think an artist has really got to wrestle with their ego all the time, and have many ego deaths, and then crawl out of the hole and go, I guess I am good enough. But in college, it's not freshman year, submitting to that literary magazine in my college, and then just basically, knocking it out of the park first time out. They took 4 or 5 poems. And I knew then that this was something that was natural to me. I think, different people when they try, whether it be whatever their art might be, whether it's cooking or music or whatever, if you get up in the morning and that's what you do, that's the way you think, that's what you, and it doesn't, you don't have to like force yourself to do it or like, oh God, this is a chore,
right.
Although sometimes it can be. That's where, for me, it was like, wow, this is what I naturally feel like I should be doing. Always have. Cool. Whenever I became conscious of my own self, beyond childhood, I was like, look, this is what I should be doing. Mm-hmm. This is what makes me feel good. And so as soon as I got, you get the book and the book comes and, it's like to open up a new book and kind of break it in and smell it and, oh, there's your words.
Right.
In print.
Awesome.
So it was like, wow, that's forever,
Yeah.
This is forever.
That is awesome.
So it's that feeling of permanence, which that can be debated as well. The impermanence of art, and what's in the book now. How long, whatever.
Right.
The life of the whatever life that your words or your thoughts might have. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sounds like a poem right there.
Totally. Yeah. See,
I'll chew on that. I'll chew on that one. But yeah, as soon as you see yourself, in a book, a lot of times, for me, if I'm in the same journal as a writer that I might really be impressed by, I'm kind of like, whoa, what am I doing in here?
Right.
I suppose it's like being booked at a festival, and it's like there's a headliner, and you're like, oh man, wow, and you have all this, you're crushing on the headliner, but it's like sometimes you have to step back a bit because maybe it's your partner, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever is going to say, hey, you're on the festival bill too. So
right, yeah,
it's kind of like that.
Exactly.
It's kind of like, oh gosh, I did make the cut. I am in this one.
Yeah, I am good enough. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I am good enough, and then that lasts for about 10, 15 minutes, and then you go back into the whole, oh God,
Yeah. What am I
the
doing?
Existential death, oh my gosh.
Totally. Speaking of festivals, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, you emceed for the Boats and Bluegrass Festival here in Winona last fall in 2019. And what I thought was really cool is you didn't just introduce the artists, you read some poems too. And I thought that was really cool because that adds another dimension. You got the spoken word and some poetry going on as well. A very nice compliment to music, I think. How'd you get hooked up with that, and what was that like? Well,
specifically boats. Parker and I, who I've mentioned earlier, we've dabbled in the music business here for quite some time, and the institution that is Boats and Bluegrass has been our favorite and many people's regional favorite year after year. So I suppose been going to that for the last 10 years. And the MC before me was Stanton West, and he has also been a performer there every year. And it's a daunting kind of a task to do that for 3 days straight,
right.
Morning till late at night. But when he wanted to sort of graduate from that, I was offered, and the old owners and the new owners both knew me, and I guess the pedigree or what I did, what I do. So it was a pretty smooth transition, and they got a lot of great feedback after my first year, and so last year, that's another thing. You do well one year, and then I feel like, okay, I gotta up it. I've got to be more.
Right.
There's the ego thing again, but everybody enjoys it. And you try to curate. You try to mesh or meld with the curation that is a festival as well done as Boats, and also you have to deal with everybody else's, all the other artists' emotional quotients, and to try to get into the essence of who they are, and maybe try to work up a bit of a poem, a bit of a poetic way of introducing them instead of just the monster truck bull roar like
right.
I try to curate a little more of a cohesive vibe throughout the whole festival,
right.
tying one band to the next, or I don't know. I guess it works because people like it. So
yeah. Oh, I thought it was great. Do you ever do any other like spoken word type things, or?
Well, I do. I've done readings. I guess there have. I was in the Driftless Writing Center this last year. Put on, their 10th anniversary or whatever it was. Put on a nice big book as they do every year, and I was in that one. So I did a reading with that. With COVID now, it's sort of interesting. I don't know if there'll be anything quite like a reading for a while. I'm taking it rather seriously. So, but you had mentioned before the Pump House. When they do something like a competition, I've I guess I've done pretty well. Been fortunate enough to do well with those competitions that they put on, and that usually results in a reading, which it's what you're calling spoken word. So I get up and read. Okay. That's the other thing too. I'm kind of old school that way. It's like skateboarding. I don't know. Grew up in a small town. I had a Schwinn Stingray. I never got into the skateboarding thing, right. But it's like I'm kind of old enough now where I didn't get into the poetry slams or the all the stuff that's the newer people are, the younger people are doing. Right. I'm a middle-aged white guy, and I just give me a podium and a glass of water and a microphone, maybe, sort of a thing.
Right.
So I don't do the sort theatrical thing.
Yeah, well, and I like that you brought up the Pump House thing, because that's where the Mark My Words event was, right?
Yeah.
That was really cool, I thought, because that's where you wrote a poem inspired by a drawing or painting, wasn't it? Like each poet is paired up with a visual artist, and
yeah.
So what was that like? Process.
Well, they've done it a few different ways, the Pump House, and bless them for doing that regionally, for actually having that. I love these regional art centers that, because we're such a sub category group. It's like there's like Dungeons and Dragons people, and then we're somewhere like three slots below them. Poets. We're like subgroup people, but they, it's called Mark My Words, and they've done, 3, 4, 5 of these over the years, over the past maybe 10 or 15 years. And it's either the stimulus is they ask for submissions for paintings and from poets, and then they will take paintings or any sort of visual art. I shouldn't just say painting. Some of it could be a mixed media art sort of thing. And then they'll give that stimulus to the poet, and the poet then has 30 days to come up with some. Or some years it's been they take poets, a poem that they ask for, and then they give it to the visual artist, and they have 30 or 90 days to create something. Okay. And so this year or last year it was that I got a picture, and then was to write something for that, and I do like that. I like that sort of, once in a while I do like a deadline, and I like a visual stimulus like this. And that's why I work well with musicians with their liner notes or something with their album, because I can listen to their thing. This is what I think of their thing. So, this particular one, it was a nice image, and it was kind of a somber image, so that's good for me. And I was able to pull something out of it that, I guess it resonated. I got a check at the end of it.
Right, so it worked, right?
It went into the bank. Yeah, no, it worked.
Cool.
That was nice.
Is that?
Yeah, that's a nice place too. What a nice place to have. That gallery is nice.
Oh, it is. So. It is. It's a fantastic place. I like what you said though about having a deadline, because sometimes that does help, or it at least alters the process enough that it's different and it feels, maybe fresh or new, and there's different writing groups around here, and I suppose with a lot of artists, having something where you can come back to like okay, I gotta work some new material because I'm going to have either a gig or a showing, or I'm going to, for me it might be, and these are kind of few and far in between during the COVID here, but having maybe a writer's group where you're going to come and present something
new within a couple of, every couple of weeks, and it's incentive, I guess, because let's face it, artists are fairly fragile. We're wrestling with our ego all the time. We really want to have some validation, and none of that is I don't think any of it is like a bad thing. I mean, right. We're just trying to explore and be understood, and so being validated once in a while is okay. Yeah. And that's what's going on. And those deadlines, sometimes those deadlines are those sort of things out on the calendar, mapped out on the calendar, that gives us a little something to reach for.
Right, some structure, sometimes.
Yeah, a little bit of structure, because we can get kind of lost, and that's, you're seeing that in the music industry right now. I mean, it's tough. I mean, there's just some really, really tough stuff going on right now out there, and it's hard to see.
Yeah,
it's hard to watch happen.
Yeah, especially with so many people we both work with. I mean, it's not easy. Well, speaking of music and deadlines and pairing art, you mentioned writing liner notes. What kind of artists have you written for, and how does that kind of come up? Like, what some people, maybe some of our listeners might not know what that is. Like the notes on an album that kind of talk about the band. How do you go about doing that? Do you kind of research who they are, what they are? Do you talk to them? How does that work?
Yeah, most of the time it's somebody that I know, and sometimes I've just been asked out of the blue by, gigs like, speaking gigs like, or emceeing gigs like Boats, Boats and Bluegrass, right. Sort of gets, my name goes out there a bit, and, you might get asked a few things, but I listen and I listen and I listen, and, I'm a big Deadhead, so for me, listening to an album 10, 20, 30 times is no big deal. That's old hat to me. But, and I'll try to really just organically get the feel of this is who I'm working with. And I guess maybe I should start out with, I stick pretty much with the sort of bluegrass Americana type groups, with a few exceptions. A few experimental sort of groups, but that sort of ethos, and I just continue to listen to them until it's easy for me to write their story.
Okay.
Like, just get the data, and this is where they're from, blah, blah, blah. But that story, there's stories to that story, and you try to go a little deeper, and then eventually, if you keep boiling down the sauce, you're going to get, you're going to get the au jus. You're going to get the real concentrated part of what they are and what they're doing and what they want to say, and that energy that they want to send out, and you try to describe that. That's what I try to do. Try to get in there, and sometimes musicians are really tied to their lyric, and the lyric can be constrained, can be a bit constraining, and so if you can write more of a narrative that doesn't have to go with the music, sometimes that's more of a challenge. I always, I've got a lot of musician friends who are writers, and they have a lot easier time writing a lyric than an actual poem, or that, because you can hide a lot with music. You've got these two things going on, whereas if you've got a poem, it's pretty much, it's crickets. It's just you and it's just the words on the page, and that's it. And so, the thing is, like you said in the beginning, the thing is to try to make those words have a music of their own. Maybe that's what poetry is. I don't know. Try to have the words make music.
Yeah, definitely.
Just all by themselves.
Because it kind of, as a reader, it kind of touches me in a similar way that music does. It'll songs I really love kind of take me to a place and a feeling. And I think poetry, good writing does the same thing, I think. So Pete, we're kind of coming to the end of our time here. Where can people find out more about your work or see your work? Any plans, like when might we see the book? The book, now correct me if I'm wrong, it's Flower House and the Feral Cat?
Well,
or Son. I thought I heard you say Son earlier.
Yeah. That's Parker and I. going back and forth like an old married couple.
Uh-huh.
The title of the book is going to be Flower House and Feral Son.
Okay.
You got a working copy that
Right.
we're still working on the editing on, but you can look for that. We're in kind of the final stages of that. Putting that together, you can look for that this fall on Ramshackle Press, and it's going to be a limited edition. I'm going to sign a few of them. It's going to be hand sewn. The spine is going to be hand sewn. So some original cover art, which we're just trying to vet right now, I think by Minneapolis artist Jimmy Peterson. And so look for that this fall. And with that, the rollout, I am finally pulling the trigger and getting an artist website up. For now, like I said, I'm a middle-aged white guy, so you can get on the Facebook, interwebs there and look for me there. Send me a friend request, whatever.
Cool.
Whatever the cool kids do.
Right.
I've got an Insta nerd page too, or whatever, an account. So nice. I am sort of a technophobe. I'll be honest with you. The computer things creep me out a little bit. So.
Well, and I like that you mentioned typewriters early on too, because that when playing music, I'm really fascinated by older gear. Things outside of the computer realm. I like knobs and switches and things that actually move. So I like that you mentioned the typewriter. I think that's cool.
I work on a 1954 Royal HH.
Oh.
So.
Wow.
And then that's my. So it's kind of like driving it's like driving a car. Look at the cars from 1954. That's the kind of typewriter I have. It's like that kind of thing.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, Ramshackle Press is where we can find it this fall, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good.
And then you can find me on. If you Google me or whatever. Different journals that have published me. I'm sure. Last time I looked, I'm on a few. Splattered about those. So, it'll pop up.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. I've been here talking to Pete Engen, and he's a local poet. His first full book is going to be published this fall, Flower House and Feral Son. So look for that on Ramshackle Press. Pete, so glad to talk to you today. So good.
This has been cool.
Yeah, thank you so much. Maybe when the book comes out, we should have you on again, and we can promote that a little bit.
Ooh, I would like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure the publisher would too.
Awesome. Well, definitely. Well, let's keep that in mind, and we'll stay in touch. And thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, you too. Be well, man. Thanks a lot.
Art Beat is written and produced by KQAL-FM on the campus of Winona State University. Visit us on the web at kqal.org.
Thanks again to Pete Engen for joining us today on Art Beat. Check out Ramshackle Press for Pete's book of poetry titled Flower House and Feral Son. For more conversations on art, tune into Art Beat Tuesdays at 12:30 right here on 89.5 KQAL. I'm Bill Stoneberg, and we've just heard from local poet Pete Engen on Art Beat. Is art an important part of your life? Tune into Artbeat Tuesdays at 12:30 right here on 89.5 KQAL. Artbeat is made possible by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund.